Okay, and we are live on, well, basically everywhere at the moment. We're on Periscope, on Twitter, we're on Twitch, YouTube, and Facebook. Welcome to Dan Weston from AKA Tennis Ratings. Thank you very much for jumping on and having a chat this evening, or well, this morning for you over in the UK.
Yeah, hey Steve, how are you doing? Looking forward to this.
Yeah, I'm going okay. It's been probably a busy month or two, really, since the tour's come back. How have you found things since the tour resumed? Obviously, it's normally quite a long slog over 11 months of a season. How have you found? How did you find the time away? And then how have you found things since the tour came back?
Yeah, it's been really strange. Obviously, a strange year. Having like 5 months off where there wasn't a great deal to do. Wondering when the tour was going to come back, and thinking about income streams and stuff like that, and everything's kind of just obviously just went completely. And luckily came back in. And the women's tournament started off on clay. I was quite sort of reticent to get involved much to start with, primarily because it had been basically a year since anyone had played on clay, so we had a really difficult. It's really difficult to ascertain a player's level, and particularly someone who's quite data driven as well. It was difficult to really work out whether a player's stats from a year ago were really going to be that worthwhile, or a year ago, or between a year and 2 years ago, really that applicable now. So I think it was really quite prudent to be cautious to start with, and as the tour has rolled on, I've become more okay with looking at the data side of things a lot more, and particularly now having spent quite a lot of time profiling particularly the clay tournament since the tour resumed. For me, there seems like it's a really clear dynamic where young players are performing very well. They've come out of lockdown stronger, and I also think that that's applicable in other sports as well, particularly something that I've noticed in English Premier League and football as well. That's been the case too, and also sort of out and out clay quarters have done pretty well as well. So if you can find a young out and out clay quarter who's got high potential, then that seems to be a good way of finding some value. And we've already seen that with the likes of Iga Swiatek this week in Paris as well. So she fits that bill and has done well, obviously.
Yeah, definitely. And I guess looking to Paris and the whole tournament, I guess there was a bit of uncertainty with the tournament going ahead. Obviously, it was a lot of concerns in the lead up, and obviously the tennis players and all of us who provide content on tennis were obviously keen for things to continue. How have you found the qualifying and I guess the first couple of days of the tournament, given we're talking about different conditions to what we normally see, and how the overall state of the tournament? How have you found things so far?
Yeah, well, I think it kind of reinforced my view even further with the fairly slow conditions that the genuine clay quarters, return orientated clay quarters in particular, probably will thrive in these kind of conditions more. And we've already seen a lot of the big server players have kind of struggled. Isner losing to Corda yesterday, for example, which perhaps wasn't that much of a surprise, but still, big name versus small name, big server versus not such big server kind of thing. And I think that the sort of genuine clay quarters are they're gonna shape up pretty well in this. For example, I had Ramos on giving up quite a few games against Manarino in round one, and obviously Manarino does his best work in quick conditions, particularly grass, and it was just seemed very, very apparent that Ramos would be much better suited to the conditions than Manarino would in that first round match, for example.
Yeah, and he certainly ran away with that match. And have you noticed anything different, I guess, across and also for the US Open, I guess, for the men's as well, the best of five? Is there any particular trends or anything that you've noticed that's perhaps a little bit different to pre-COVID times, or?
Best of five. I mean, maybe it's a bit of recency bias and perhaps gambler's fallacy to some extent. It's not something I've looked at massively, but gambler's fallacy to some extent, thinking about all these like mammoth fifth sets that we seem to be having, I think that, for example, as well, Alexander Zverev playing over 4 hours yesterday is not going to do him many favours at all. I was probably going to be quite keen to oppose him in round 3 against Cecchinato prior to the second round matches being played, but now I'm a little bit less confident on that coming off the back of a 4 hour match. But also at the French is that interesting dynamic as well, where a player playing a long 5-setter on the Sunday still gets 2 rest days, which you don't get normally at a Grand Slam. So there's a lot of things to consider at the moment, I think. But yeah, I'm generally not massively in favour of getting involved with guys who play like 4-hour 5-setters or whatever. I mean, the market has, I think, really changed in this respect, though. I mean, going back a number of years, the players playing 5-setters used to they never really used to take it into account much, and now I think it's gone the other way, and it's like they're overvaluing their opponent basically a lot of the time. So yeah, it's an interesting one, but like I said, Zverev versus Cecchinato tomorrow, I thought was something that I was going to look at. Zverev giving up a few games on the handicap and looking at that angle, but I'm not so convinced about it now, having seen them struggle past Pierre Hugues yesterday.
Yeah, it was a bit more of a struggle than I was anticipating there, and there's obviously been a couple of those big name players. You look at Tsitsipas and Rublev and these guys who have put together a fair volume of tennis, and obviously both of them, both Rublev and Tsitsipas in particular, played Hamburg last week, and then also basically in sync with their comebacks the other day. How have you found those two guys? And I guess particularly from my perspective, Andrei Rublev is someone that I've kind of been a little bit surprised about his clay form.
Yeah. You go. Yeah.
And I think from my perspective, I found that he has been vulnerable at times, but he's obviously exceeded my expectations with his win in Hamburg, and he's been solid at Hamburg over the last couple of years. But I personally have felt that that Rublev's been a little bit overvalued, and perhaps even so again today against Davidovich Fokina. But he's a bit of an interesting one because he seems to be delivering now on quite a consistent basis across all surfaces, and is really bridging the gap to those kind of top guys in terms of that consistency, which we haven't seen from him in the past.
So I first of all, the match today, I actually kind of think the price is about right for today's match. But one thing that I've looked at quite a lot with Rublev on clay is that last year I think that his underlying data was perhaps better than the results that he obtained and the performances that he looked like on the surface. So looking at his service and return points, 1% is actually like 104 last year, which is very, very decent for a player of his age. Or you've got that, he's prone to improvement, obviously, this year. But his service hold and break percentages were only ended up to 103. So that shows you that generally they've underperformed on break points on service and return, which indeed was the case looking at his data. He's underperformed by 3 or 4% on break points based on service points 1 and return points 1 expectation. So there was quite a lot of scope, I think, for him to kick on this year. But saying that, I'm surprised at the level that he has shown us, probably still higher than what I thought it would be the case. But he's obviously a player with pretty high potential. Tsitsipas is an interesting one because I've written about him a lot in Betfair previews before of being. I think he's incredibly overrated. His clay numbers are improving better than other surfaces in my view, particularly on return, which I think is a deficiency that he's shown so far in his career. I have a thing where I looked a while back at historical Grand Slam winners, and they all had like above average return numbers by reasonable mark over the last decade in the men's, and he hasn't really got to that level, which I think will hold him back. And the fact that his return numbers aren't stellar would suggest that he's more prone to playing longer sets and longer matches, which is definitely not an advantage in the men's Grand Slams, obviously, from that kind of accumulative fatigue point of view. So that's definitely not a positive for him generally. It'll be interesting to see how he gets on against Pablo Cuevas today.
Yes, yeah, they've had a couple of interesting matches over the last 12, 15 months. I think Cuevas just couldn't quite convert a couple of opportunities a couple of weeks ago in their matchup. Now, we've talked about a couple of the big names on the men's side, looking at, and obviously just trying to kind of highlight a couple of players that some people who are watching this, who they perhaps don't know too much about. If you were to look at the draw at the moment, and in terms of the players that are left, who's a player that I guess comes to mind as someone who perhaps may still not be at that consistent level, but over the next, say, 5-10 years is probably going to make a pretty big name for themselves on either tour?
Yeah, so a couple in the men's to start with. I mean, Casper Ruud has been playing really well this year on clay, but still might not be household names in terms of his overall ranking and general profile. Was surprised that he got taken to 5 yesterday by Tommy Paul, but we've seen a really high level from Ruud on clay this year, and I think that there's a absolute ton more upside to come. So he's someone I definitely think will be like, say, top 5, top 10 level on clay in the coming years. It'll be really interesting to see how he matches up against Dominic Thiem tomorrow. And I'm also interested to see how Sebastian Korda does as well in the men's, because obviously his dad's got an illustrious history. I think his two sisters are professional golfers as well, so he's got that kind of those sporting genes, if you like. And he's undervalued on clay right now a lot of the time. So I've got quite decent expectations for him on the surface as well, moving forward, and hopefully showing some more future upside as well. In the women's, well, where do we start? Because there's just a ton of talented players right now. So I think the most obvious starting point will be Clara Towson after her headlining over Jennifer Brady on, when was it now? Wednesday. Wednesday? Yeah. No, Tuesday.
Tuesday.
All these days blur into one right now.
Definitely.
So yeah, I mean, obviously that was my main pick that day on Betfair. Towson, it was the pick I was waiting for the entire round one. So I priced up all the matches on like Friday, and that was the day. I was just, every day I was looking at the schedule, hoping that match was going to be on the schedule, and it was put onto the last day for round one. And it didn't surprise me at all. I think Towson's numbers at ITF level are just unbelievable for a 17-year-old, and the fact that she's going to have so much future upside makes it. I would be extremely surprised if she didn't get to like top 10 level without unreasonable luck. It doesn't always happen because someone like CC Bellis a few years ago, for example, I pegged in that trajectory as well. But obviously she's had a lot of injury problems, so it kind of pushed her back. So but with average luck, I think Towson has definitely got top 10 potential, and possibly even quite a bit higher than that even. A couple of other players in the women's draw who have massive potential. Elena Rybakina, who's a player that I really like to get to the later stages here. She's where's his matches today? Yeah, she's facing against Fiona Ferro today, and Ferro's got a good clay record as well, albeit maybe at a lower level. So there's a couple there, and also I had one more that I was just going to call this. Where is it? Igor Swiatek. However, I forget. She's smashed it in the first 2 rounds here. She's someone that I've been discussing for about a year as having really high clay potential, and I just see the sky's the limit for her. Really, she's another player in that Towson mold who has come through the ITFs with amazing clay numbers, and I just see her as being extremely talented clay player, and from a data-driven perspective, it would be a real surprise if she didn't win a bunch of tournaments on clay in the coming years. And she's already into like sub-30s for this tournament already, which is pretty mad. But I think that. But then you look at the players below her in the market, you don't see that many who are better than her. So maybe it's about right.
Yeah, and I'd agree with that. And I think with Swiatek, obviously, she burst onto the scene a little bit, particularly when she first got to that WTA level, and then I think everyone's expectation, everyone kind of jumped at her a little bit in terms of, looking at what we're expecting from her. It almost feels, from my perspective, like the break and the time off's probably done her a world of good. I actually thought she looked pretty good at the US Open when she lost to Azarenka, who did go on to win the tournament, but she's looking very solid in terms of, in a lot of situations, yesterday against, say, being able to come back from a breakdown in that second set, and she's starting to figure things out, which is really impressive considering she's still so young.
And that defeat to Azarenka in New York is like completely forgivable, following the form lines after that. If you're looking at kind of from a horse racing perspective, you're beaten by like a group one winner or something like that.
Exactly.
So 100%. And I think the hard court's not her best surface right now. I think she's much more competent on clay, and I think I was surprised she lost to Arantxa Rus in Rome, but by the same token, with young, you get a bit of inconsistency sometimes, but you also get ridiculous upside when it all comes together. And I think it's coming together pretty nicely right now.
Definitely, and she certainly looked good through the first couple of rounds. Now, we thought, just because obviously it's, we're looking at about 10-15 minutes until play actually gets underway in Paris. If we just maybe have a quick look at a couple of matches, and one for today, it is Clara Towson, who we did mention before, against Danielle Collins. Now, how have you found this matchup from an odds perspective? Obviously, Towson's actually come into this one as quite a clear favourite. Obviously beat Jennifer Brady, saved a couple of match points and came from a breakdown. I think it was in that third set, versus Danielle Collins, who came from a set and a breakdown against Monica Niculescu, who I wouldn't want to be playing in these conditions in Paris. So she certainly turned the tables pretty quickly in that one.
Yeah, I mean, I think Towson is quite short today. I think it's the classic case of statement victory, and now the market has overreacted on that. I do think Towson should be favourite against Danielle Collins, but definitely not to the degree. I have Towson at 1.79 as my price today, and the market's going a bit shorter than that. So, it'll be interesting to see how she backs it up. I hope she does well. I want to see her continue her progress, because I'd love to see her play Muguruza in round 3. That would be fun. But I think that you see this quite a lot. The classic case of the market overvaluing the statement victory, and the statement victory for a young player in particular. We saw a bit maybe with Corey Goff last year, for example, quite similar type of scenario. So be interesting to see how she fares against Danielle Collins today.
Definitely, and one we were just talking about just before we came on for the show that's caught both of our eyes for tomorrow, I think, is we've got Barbara Krejcikova against Svetlana Pironkova.
Yeah, no, definitely. So it's a really weird situation where Pironkova is like a quarter of Krejcikova's outright price, because the market has basically seen her get the withdrawal over Serena yesterday, and kind of seems to have lumped the implied odds from Serena partly on Pironkova, which is a bit weird, because actually the opening lines are like even money pretty much for both players tomorrow, and I actually think Krejcikova should be favourite for this, and but Krejcikova is like ridiculously bigger in the outright market, which just makes no sense whatsoever. And Pironkova had a really, really good US Open, which probably caught everyone by surprise. But by the same token, she was never that good on clay in the old days.
Exactly.
I remember her losing to like players ranked outside top 200 on clay. Like her play numbers career-wise are pretty mediocre. So it's a big stretch to see Pironkova make the business end of this tournament. And also, I would say that she tends to do her best work in quite quick conditions as well. So she's got a decent grass record, for example. And I'm not sure these sort of slowish clay conditions are going to be massively to her advantage moving forward in this tournament as well. And, she got a walkover yesterday. Yeah, so she's quite fresh from that perspective. But by the same token, I don't see her making the latter stages in this at all.
Perfect. And obviously, I know you're very, very busy, like we all are at the moment. So I do thank you for jumping on and having a chat. For anyone who hasn't come across your stuff before, and I'd be amazed if they haven't, where's the best place to find all your work at the moment?
Yeah, so you can check out my website, which is www.tennisratings.co.uk. And I'm on Twitter @tennisratings as well. So give me a follow on there, and yeah, feel free to get in touch if you've got any questions. You can drop me an email as well. That's at tennistrades@gmail.com.
Perfect. Alrighty. Thank you very much, and good luck for today, and good luck
Yeah,
to anyone
likewise.
following along as well. And hopefully we can do this again sometime.
100%, it'll be great fun.
Perfect. Thank you very much for joining me, and thanks everyone for tuning in.